Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and this is a Heel Heat Top 10. The topic of this Top 10? Better Off in TNA. Basically, as it states, it's wrestlers that have had careers in both the WWE and TNA and did better off in TNA. Simple concept, right? Let's jump right into it with our number 10. Monty Brown, aka Marcus Corvon. Monty Brown was a guy who early on in TNA was a standout wrestler, one of their main event guys, one of the guys that they were building for the future. A guy that easily could contend for any championship in the company. We see he leaves TNA for the greener pastures of WWE, goes their WWE ECW reboot as Marcus Corvon, actually seems to get a little bit of a push, gets the company behind him a bit. However, from what I understand and what I've always heard is he left the business to take care of some family issues. So we never really got to see him live up to his potential. What we do know is that in TNA he was a big deal, in WWE not so much. Now number 9 is actually a guy that WWE tried to make a big deal, and that's Bobby Lashley. They pushed him to the moon. Famously, he was in the match at WrestleMania, I believe 23, where he was in Trump's corner and McMahon had Umaga, or Trump was in his corner, Donald Trump that is, President Donald Trump, and Vince McMahon was in the corner of Umaga. Loser had to shave their head, either be Trump or McMahon. We know how that went. We know the results. The thing of it was that as good as or as much as they tried to push Lashley, he never really caught on. He gets his walking papers basically, goes over to TNA, does his thing with Bellator, builds up a more MMA-infused wrestling style, a more legitimate style, works on his promos, becomes one of the highlights of TNA, one of the guys that over the last few years actually made it worth tuning into TNA to see. Just off of that, gets him onto this list. Now our number 8, Raven. Here's a guy that I'm a big fan of. He was great in the original ECW. The character was so different and revolutionary and so perfect for the time that when he went on to WCW and even WWE after, I always had the thought that if they really let this guy go and gave him the push or gave him just a little bit of backing, he could have been a main event guy, a world champion. Alas, it wasn't to be. Raven leaves WWE, shows up in TNA, and becomes one of the real early crossover stars, becomes a TNA champion, highlight of the company, and main eventer all the way through, gives legitimacy to some of the guys on the roster, gives Jeff Jarrett someone that's credible to wrestle against, gives guys like AJ Styles, the Disciples of the New Church, Kazarian, and others all the way through his run, Abyss, gives them a credible opponent, a guy that has that name value, and someone to help elevate the company while elevating himself as well. Now our number 7, Austin Aries. Austin Aries did everything you could do in TNA, world champion, X Division champion, tag team champion. He is one of the real highlights of TNA the entire career, and I know I've said this a couple times already, and I'm probably going to say it a couple more, but Aries was a guy that had basically unlimited potential. and he reached it in TNA. Also, reached it in Ring of Honor. He was great there as well. So when it came time that Austin Aries signed with WWE, it was only a matter of time before he was going to be that guy. Whether he be the face of 205 Live, or a star on SmackDown, or a star on Raw, it was only a matter of time, or at least that's what everybody thought. Again, his career flamed out a little bit in WWE. After a little bit over a year, requested his release, was let go. And as of this taping, he's back in Impact Wrestling, basically the new version of TNA. TNA, the name is gone. It's now Impact Wrestling. He's there, wrestling again. I won't give out any spoilers if you haven't seen what he's doing there, so kudos to Austin Aries. He's a guy that I like a lot. I don't understand what the disconnect in WWE was. Now our number 6. We talk about Divas Revolution or Women's Revolution, but this was one of the forerunners. TNA back in 2007 started with their Knockouts division. And the Knockouts division was far superior to WWE's Divas division of the time. It focused more on actual wrestling. One of the stars of the Knockouts division, Awesome Kong. I mean, she was an absolute monster. If you didn't see Kong, think of Braun Strowman's run now, and that's what you had. You had Kong, who was a destroyer. She's a machine. She ran through everybody. She had great matches with everybody from the Beautiful People to ODB to Taylor Wilde to Gail Kim to whoever they put in front of her. Just an amazing talent. Again, signs with the WWE, has some issues with a pregnancy, injuries, signs as Karma. The only real highlights of her career there is she was one of the few women that participated in the Men's Royal Rumble. Other than that, didn't do much of anything, was let go. And we've seen her here and there on the Indies, come back to TNA for a little while. Most famously, she was in the Glow series last year, which I thought she was phenomenal in. But realistically, we can't talk about the revolution in women's wrestling and don't go with the WWE narrative. It didn't start in WWE. It started in TNA. It started in indie groups like Shimmer, Shine, Queens of Combat, and plenty of others that I'm failing to mention, but those are the big ones. But TNA really was the first place you could see on national TV women's wrestling given equal footing as the men. Now our number 5, Christian, aka Christian Cage. This probably would be higher on my list if not for the fact that Christian, without his TNA run, would still be a WWE Hall of Fame. He's a multiple-time tag champion, multiple-time Intercontinental champion, 2-time WWE champion or World Heavyweight champion. However, all of that, his whole entire career in WWE, I felt like he was in the shadow of Edge. Goes over to TNA, before he was WWE champion, becomes their champion 2 times, is made to be a huge star, a focal point of their show. His run in TNA really wasn't that long, but the impact it had, no pun intended, is still resonating to this day. Christian went from being a guy that I believe WWE only seen as a mid-card or tag team guy, showed them that he could be a main event star, came back and they used him as such. To me, though, his best work was always in TNA. His stuff with AJ Styles, Tom Coe, Kurt Angle, to me, his run in TNA is better than anything he did in WWE. And it's what I'm going to remember him for most. Now, our number 4, Derek Bateman. What's that? You don't know that name? You know him better by EC3, Ethan Carter III. The reason you don't know Derek Bateman, or if you do, it's because that was the character he originally played in WWE. He was part of the NXT when it was still a competition show. Never really made it to the main roster, had a couple spots here and there. Really an afterthought, was let go, goes to TNA, reinvents himself as Ethan Carter III, becomes one of their big stars. Again, like I said with Lashley, one of the reasons we've watched these last couple of years. Goes on, beats guys like Sting, Bully Ray, Kurt Angle. I mean, just hangs with all these legends and looks great and builds up this character that really wasn't too far different than Derek Bateman. Just somebody gave him the chance to do something with himself. And when he was given the chance, he pounced on it, took off, became a big star. Now he's back in WWE in NXT again, fittingly as EC3. So we'll see where he goes from here. But as of this taping, his career in TNA was much better than WWE. Now, our number 3, Ron the Truth Killings, aka R-Truth. You might know R-Truth, and you might know him as K-Quick, and you may even know as Ron the Truth Killings Ron. He was one of the guys that was there in the beginning of TNA, and he was an NWA World Champion. He was a guy that they really booked strongly, and he wasn't a comedy gimmick. He was actually a good wrestler who could talk, which he still can, and he always could. He's never got the opportunity to be as good as he was in TNA and WWE in either one of his runs, either as K-Quick or as R-Truth. And it's a real shame because the guy was multi-talented, still is multi-talented. He's a guy that could either get you to love him as a face or get you to hate him as a heel. But to me, WWE never used him to his full potential. TNA, you could say it's because of a lack of depth in their roster. I say they more understood that he was a guy that actually could be a main event guy, and they used him as such. Now, coming off of that, our number 2. Probably the guy that everybody expected to see on this list. Wildcat Chris Harris, a.k.a. Braden Walker. Now, if you're not familiar with TNA, you probably don't remember either of these names. Wildcat Chris Harris was part of a tag team called America's Most Wanted with James Storm, who we all know and love. Early on in TNA, they were the best tag team in TNA for a long time. At the time, it was looked at that Chris Harris would have been the Shawn Michaels of the team, and James Storm would be the Marty Jannetty if they broke up. We did eventually get to that point. Chris Harris leaves the company, goes to WWE, famously puts on some weight, gets a little bit out of shape, debuts as Braden Walker, is on TV for 2 weeks, and fired. He's barely heard from again. I believe he's popped up in TNA a couple odd times, doing things with James Storm. James Storm goes on to be one of the highlights of TNA, one of their main guys for the last decade. Chris Harris becomes an afterthought. A joke with the Braden Walker, the knock knock, who's there? Braden Walker. But he was a guy, he really, to me even, I thought he had all the potential in the world. I guess it's a combination of him letting himself go, with the WWE putting him in the ECW product, which wasn't great at the time, along with the fact that I don't think they really understood what to do with the guy. If they would have done it right, they should have put him in developmental, let him get in better shape, then brought him up to the main roster, then debuted him. Could have been Braden Walker, but hindsight's 2020, and that one probably all the way around. I guess I would say everybody probably regrets that decision. Now, before we go to our number one, we do a thing here on the top tens called the best of the rest. Basically, the guys or girls that were considered for the list, but for whatever reason did not make it. First up, Mr. Kennedy, aka Mr. Anderson. Early in Mr. Kennedy's career in WWE, he was projected to be a main event guy, was given a Money in the Bank win, was reportedly going to be the son of Vince McMahon. He falls out of favor with the company, gets fired, goes to TNA as Mr. Anderson, goes on to become a multiple-time champion, and the rest is history. Next up, Drew Galloway, aka Drew McIntyre. Now, Drew Galloway's run in TNA is very short, but it's also very impactful. Again, no pun intended. He came in, he conquered, he came in and thrust himself right to the head of the company, made himself a huge star there, made you believe that he was the top guy in the company. Has a short run. Now he's back in NXT. Probably the only reason he's he's not on the list is how short his run was in TNA. And last but not least, for the best of the rest, Low-Ki, aka Kaval. Low-Ki was one of the guys that really put the X Division on the map. He's one of the standout stars of the early TNA days. Still comes back every now and then to TNA. Had his try in WWE, much like a lot of people at the time went through the NXT system, was renamed Kaval. Actually looked like they wanted to do stuff with him. Unfortunately, he requested his own release. Who knows what might have been, but as of now, and as of probably forever, Low-Ki was much better off in TNA than he ever was in WWE. Now, before I get to number one, if you think I've left somebody off the list, if you think I put someone too high, someone too low, let me know what you think. Leave a comment right down here. Let me know if you think I'm totally wrong, if you agree with everything I said, if you think I don't have the order right. Again, if you think I left somebody off. Also, while you're there, like, comment, and share. Get this all over the place. And finally, our number one competitor that was better off in TNA, Gail Kim. Much like I mentioned with Awesome Kong earlier, Gail Kim was a real star of the Knockouts division, one of the first stars. Her and Awesome Kong is the best feud of the Knockouts division they ever had. And she's just an amazing wrestler. She had 2 runs in WWE, won their championship, but she won it at a time when the Divas division was an afterthought. It was a 3-minute match on the show, a 5-minute match on the pay-per-view. Maybe the world champion gets on the pre-show at WrestleMania. Most likely not. But that was it. It was nothing. It was goofs. It was gags. It was bra and panty matches. It was Diva ring around the rosy, Diva musical chairs, Divas dressing up for the holidays. I mean, it wasn't anything that was taken seriously. Gail Kim became the face of the Knockouts. She won 6 Knockouts championships. She became a TNA Hall of Famer. One of the best wrestlers, male or female, in the world, bar none. And it really showed how different the attitudes were between the two companies, that she would come to TNA, come back, and how they pushed her and made her a focal point of their show. At times, the Knockouts division carried the show more than anything else. Kudos to Gail. Kudos to everybody that made that decision because, like I said with Awesome Kong, I believe the women's revolution really started in 2007 in TNA, spread out to the different companies, like I said, Shine, Shimmer, and such. Started bubbling up in WWE developmental. We got to see a bit of it in NXT, and then boom, it exploded onto the main roster about 2 years ago. It's about time to treat it with respect, treat the women as more than just a footnote. And Gail Kim's one of the pioneers that we can really thank for that. And I believe when you look back in 10, 15 years, and people are giving their Hall of Fame speeches, a lot of the current crop of wrestlers, a lot of the current crop of women out there, Rosemary, Allie, Laurel Van Ness, Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Bayley, Alexa Bliss, they're all going to say that Gail Kim was one of the inspirations for them. Gail Kim was a woman that they looked up to and that they thought was the reason they thought that they could be a wrestler. But basically, that's all I had to say on this top 10. My name is George Coles. This has been another episode of Heel Heat.